Hi, I'm Tommy Hayfield, and this is the NBC Nightly Nudes. Today is July 4th. There are no FBI updates that I received today. So today I'm going to offer you a bit of old news, birthday news. It's our birthday. It's the birthday of independence. So today I'll give you a reading from the Declaration of Independence, which I just recorded, and I'll set up that reading briefly with a little bit of trivia. July 4, 1776 was 442 days after the first shots were fired in Massachusetts, between a group of locals in Massachusetts who were trying to block the British Army from getting to Concord to seize an ammunition depot. That was the first shots that were fired. 8 colonials were killed on that day, and 442 days later, Thomas Jefferson, along with 4 others, who were charged with drafting a separation paper between the colonies and the British United Kingdom, the British Empire. The 5 people who are charged with drafting the Declaration of Independence were Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, Ben Franklin of Pennsylvania, John Adams of Massachusetts, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and Robert R. Livingston of New York. These were men who the Continental Congress had decided should officially be put in charge of drafting the document. Of course, Thomas Jefferson primarily was assigned the task after they had already narrowed it down to those 5 people. He drafted the entire document with corrections which he later reported were made by Ben Franklin and John Adams. So the document is primarily his. It was written in the last 10 days or 2 weeks of June of 1776, and was ratified by, though not signed immediately, on July 4th, 1776. It has been argued that it hadn't been signed until August, but it was ratified by because all the people couldn't be reached at that point in those colonial times. So anyway, here's the Declaration of Independence. I just recorded it. It was the first document of its kind in the world. This was essentially the establishment, the rules for how a democratic government should exist. Here we are.
The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, to assume among the powers of the earth, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces the design reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, lest those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, proposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated the government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, which befall themselves by their hands. It has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petition have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by Every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to the rule of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by the legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which announces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these United Colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, and they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown. That all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all their acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
That's the Declaration of Independence. Few comments. You can't really take this for granted either, because look at what the Patriot Act has done. If you look at the Patriot Act and you listen to those grievances we had against King George, this sounds like the grievances we have against the government. Some people like to say the Republicans. I choose to think that this is the FBI and the Department of Justice's big deal. The Patriot Act wouldn't mean anything unless we had the FBI to implement it. So, I mean, these legally quartering troops in people's houses, that's nothing more than illegal wiretapping. That's the same thing. I mean, it's like having a visitor in your house all the time. That's just illegally quartering troops in your house. I mean, how are you going to tell them to leave, right? You can't even see the quote unquote troops anyway. I just did this to remind people that Declaration of Independence is a great thing, but vigilance is what you really need to have, because freedom isn't free. I mean, Patriot Act, a lot of people think that's just, well, so what? Maybe kids do. Anyone who's ever seen the Nixons and the Hoovers of the world and the unnamed people of the last 20-some years, freedom isn't free. Patriot Act is real. It's nothing more than a piece of paper which gives people blind, path, just a secured path with no questions asked. I'm just saying, freedom isn't free. This FBI is the one who implements the Patriot Act. Just think about that. I'm Tommy Hayfield, and this is the NBC Nightly Nudes. This is the July 4th edition.